She thanked her boyfriend with tears in her voice, called him her rock, said he believed in her more than anyone ever had. 6 months of dating, and he got the glory. But 18 years of sacrifice? That didn't even get a blink. I was sitting right there, front row, dressed in the same church outfit I wore to her kindergarten ceremony, hands folded in my lap, heart swollen, but not with pride, child, with pain. The whole auditorium clapped, loud, joyful. Her friends, her teachers, even him, standing tall like he was the one who stayed up all those nights with her fever, like he packed her lunch every single school day from first grade to senior year. She looked out into the crowd, smiled through those tears, but she looked right past me, like I was just another seat. Like I hadn't been the one pulling double shifts, skipping meals and mending her uniform when she outgrew it mid-semester. But I didn't cry. No, I didn't make a scene. I just reached down, picked up my purse, and pulled out that envelope I'd been saving since the day she first said she wanted to go to college. And while the applause was still ringing, I stood up, calm, quiet, and walked over to the counselor's desk with something she never expected. Before I continue, child, thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for letting me tell it plain. Now tell me, where are you listening from? Are you on your porch? In your kitchen? Riding home from work? I may not know your name, but I feel you. I truly do. And if you've ever sat in a room full of people and still felt invisible, if someone stood in their moment of glory and acted like you didn't help carry them there, then you already know what I felt that day. You're not alone in that silence. Not at all. If you've got a story buried deep, one that still stings when you remember it, child, leave a comment below or send a little message. This porch light's always on, and I've got time to hear you. Now let me take you back. Back to where it all started. Back to the first time I realized I'd have to raise her on my own. I was 28 when her father passed. A car accident. Quick, cruel. He left for work and never came back. One phone call, and the whole world changed. He was the only man who ever called me his peace. And just like that, I had to become strong for 2. She was only 3. Still learning how to hold a spoon, still calling everything daddy. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, holding her while she cried for him, too little to understand what gone really meant. I couldn't cry with her. I had to stay steady. So I waited until she fell asleep to let my tears out. Some nights, they lasted until sunrise. There was no family rushing in to help, no parents with deep pockets, no siblings knocking on the door. Just me. A young mother with a baby on one hip and a stack of bills on the other. I took night shifts at the diner, weekend shifts at the library. I cleaned houses during the day and stitched up old clothes to sell for extra change. We didn't have much, but she always had what she needed. I made sure of that. If she needed shoes, I wore the same old sandals. If the power bill was due, I lit candles and told her we were playing camping. She never knew we were broke. She just knew we were close. I learned how to braid her hair with hands that were already swollen from washing dishes all night. I learned how to hide birthday presents in the closet, how to sew Halloween costumes from old curtains, how to smile through hunger. I skipped more meals than I can count just to keep gas in the car and food in her lunchbox. I didn't raise her out of strength. I raised her out of love. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that never gets a thank you card. I did it because she was mine, and I was all she had. And through it all, I never asked her to be grateful. I just asked her to remember. That's all. She used to run into my arms after school, backpack bouncing behind her, talking a mile a minute about her day. I'd barely close the front door and she'd already be asking what was for dinner, what movie we were watching, or could we bake cupcakes just because. Those were the good years. The sweet ones. When all she needed was a hug and some spaghetti to feel safe in the world. But something shifted around 15. Not all at once, more like a slow turning of a dial I didn't even notice at first. One day she stopped sitting at the kitchen table while I cooked. The next she started answering me with, "I'm fine," even when I knew she wasn't. Then came the phones, the long texts, the locked bedroom door. Suddenly I wasn't the first one to know her secrets. I was the last to find them out, if at all. And then, he showed up. A boy with fast words and louder shoes. Hair dyed at the tips, always chewing gum, always acting like he owned the sidewalk. She smiled different when he was around. Not the same full, soft smile I used to see when she opened her birthday cards. No, this was a guarded smile, like she was trying on someone else's face. He knew all the music, all the slang, all the things I didn't. But he didn't know where she came from. He didn't know the nights I held her, when she had growing pains in her legs, or the time she got scared of a thunderstorm and I held her hand until the rain stopped. He only knew the polished version. I knew the whole story. Some days she'd get dropped off at the curb and stay in the car with him for 10-15 minutes, just laughing, scrolling, whispering. I'd be standing by the window, apron still on, dinner already getting cold. She'd come in with excuses. "We were just talking," she'd say. "Why do you always assume something's wrong?" But it wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't say anymore. She stopped asking about my day. Stopped noticing the fresh flowers I put in her room every Sunday. Stopped sitting with me on the porch while the sun went down. I told myself it was just a phase. That all teenagers pull away. That one day, she'd come back around. And maybe she would've, if the boy hadn't made himself so comfortable in the space I used to hold. I didn't fight her about it. I didn't forbid the friendship. I just watched, quietly, patiently, like a mother who's seen a few storms, waiting to see if this one would pass. But deep down, I knew. I was starting to lose my little girl. It was a Thursday. I remember, because I had just finished making sweet tea, the kind she used to beg for when she was little. The kind with too much sugar and a slice of lemon floating on top like a crown. She was in her room with the door cracked open. Her voice floated down the hallway, mixed with the low hum of her boyfriend's voice on speaker. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I promise you. I was just passing by with a basket of laundry when I heard it. "She's just being dramatic," she said, laughing. "You know how she is. Mom always worries too much, like, relax." I stopped in my tracks. That sentence sat heavy on my shoulders like a bag of flour I didn't know I was carrying. Now let me tell you, she didn't say it with hate. It wasn't sharp. It was casual. Lazy. Like I was just some overbearing cartoon mom in the background of her story. It was the kind of tone you use for someone you think you've outgrown. I stood there, holding socks in one hand, a towel in the other, frozen in that quiet hallway. And the strangest thing was, I didn't feel angry. I didn't storm in or raise my voice. I just stood there and listened to my daughter speak of me like I was too much. It wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't remember. She didn't remember that I only started worrying after I became both mom and dad. That I had to double-check everything, because no one else was going to. That the reason she got to sleep peacefully at night was because I stayed up listening for trouble. She didn't remember the nights I checked her breathing when she had the flu, or the time I walked 2 miles in the rain to bring her a project she forgot at home. All she saw now was a woman who worried too much. And that's the part no one tells you about parenting. One day they stop seeing your effort and start seeing you as the obstacle. They take your love and shrink it down to a label: nag, worrier, overprotective. I went back to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of that same sweet tea and sat down at the table. I didn't cry, I didn't sulk, but my heart, it folded in a quiet way. Like a letter you keep in a drawer, not thrown away, but no longer read. She was growing up, yes, but she was also rewriting the story I had spent my whole life writing for her, page by page, with my hands, my time, and my prayers. And I had to sit there and watch, while she passed that pen to someone else. Now in all the noise of those high school years, friends, phones, drama, and doors slammed harder than needed, there was one woman who saw the real story behind the scenes. Her name was Mrs. Clark. She was the school counselor. Gray streaks in her hair, glasses always sliding down her nose, and a voice that could calm a tornado. She didn't talk much, but when she did, you listened. And more than that, she paid attention. I used to drop off permission slips, sign forms, send emails, the usual things moms do. But Mrs. Clark saw more than paperwork. She noticed the small stuff, like how I never missed a parent-teacher meeting, even if I showed up with flour on my apron or grease on my hands from a shift. She noticed how I sent care packages with Band-Aids, granola bars, and little notes tucked in with love. She saw it when I came to the office one morning, soaking wet, soaking it from the rain, because I'd rushed over to drop off my daughter's presentation board, after she left it on the porch. Most parents would have shrugged it off. But I couldn't bear the thought of her getting a 0 after all she worked on it. Even if she didn't thank me. Even if she didn't even know I brought it. Mrs. Clark never said much then, just gave a small nod and smiled. But I could feel it. That kind of unspoken respect. That quiet understanding between women who've carried more than they talk about. One afternoon, weeks before graduation, I bumped into her near the front office. She asked how I was holding up. I gave the usual answer, I'm fine. But she looked at me with eyes that said, no, how are you really? Then she said something I never forgot. You're not just her mother. You're her net. But even nets tear when pulled too far. I just stood there. That one sentence held more truth than most people ever say out loud. She knew. She saw the weight I was carrying, not just in my arms, but in my spirit. She saw the effort, the worry, the pride, and yes, even the pain. From that moment on, I knew I wasn't completely alone. I had an ally, not one who waved a flag or made a fuss, but one who saw me. One who understood that love, real love, isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like a mother standing quietly at the back of a crowd, clapping with tired hands and a heart full of hope. And that same woman? She was sitting near the stage the day I stood up with that envelope in my purse. She saw me walk, and she nodded, just like always. That envelope didn't just hold money, it held years. I started saving for her college the same week she turned 11. It wasn't much at first, just the extra change from tips at the diner, crumpled bills from side jobs, whatever was left after rent and groceries and shoes for growing feet. I'd tuck it into a little metal box I kept under the sink, wrapped in an old dish towel so no one would think twice if they saw it. Sometimes I baked banana bread and sold it at church just to add a few extra dollars. Other times I ironed neighbors' clothes for $5 a basket. And when winter came, I crocheted scarves and sold them 2 for $10 at the corner store. No job was too small when I had a big dream. Every single dime I tucked away had a story behind it. I remember giving up new Sunday shoes one year because I was $40 short of my monthly goal. I just polished the old ones and told myself, you're walking in purpose, not style. And when I finally moved all that money into a proper savings account, I labeled it something special. For when she flies, that's what I called it in my head. For when she flies. Because I believed with everything in me that she would fly. She was smart, sharp, full of ideas. I wanted her to step onto that campus one day with confidence, not worry. I wanted her to focus on learning, not on working extra shifts like I did. I wanted to give her the runway I never had, so I planned. I budgeted. I cut corners. I prayed over that account every single month. There were nights I stayed up late, calculating tuition costs, printing out scholarship guides, checking deadlines. You would have thought I was applying to college myself. And she knew about it too. I didn't hide it. Every now and then I'd remind her, as long as I'm breathing, your future is covered. And she'd smile and say, thanks, Mom, before going back to her phone. I thought that envelope would be the beginning of her freedom. The day I handed it over would be the day I watched her fly. But life has a funny way of teaching you that not every bird wants the nest you built. Some just want the air. And I never thought I'd have to close the cage door instead. The morning of her graduation, I woke up early. Earlier than usual. The house was quiet, but my heart was full of noise. I had been dreaming about that day for years. Not just the ceremony, but the feeling. The sense of, we made it. I ironed her gown with slow, careful hands, pressed every crease like I was smoothing out the years, hung it by the door with pride. I'd already laid out her shoes, steamed her sash, and folded the program into her handbag, just the way she liked. Breakfast was ready. Eggs, toast, fruit. Not fancy, but warm. The kind of breakfast that says today is special, and so are you. She came down the stairs in a rush, hair done, nails polished, scrolling her phone. She glanced at the plate, muttered a soft thanks without even looking up, and grabbed a single strawberry before heading back upstairs. I stood there by the counter, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. I told myself not to take it personal. Teenagers are like that, right? But still, I noticed it. The way she didn't stop to ask how I was feeling, the way she didn't say, we did it. It was all me, not we. Then came the knock at the door. It was him, the boyfriend. He was dressed sharp, tie loose around his neck like he wanted to look polished but not too grown. He smiled wide, handed her a single flower, and she lit up like Christmas lights. That smile, I hadn't seen it in months. Not for me, not in my direction. She took photos with him on the porch. I offered to snap a few. They posed, they laughed. He whispered something in her ear that made her blush. She leaned into him like he was her home. I took her pictures. I held her purse. I reminded her not to forget her tassel. She thanked me with her eyes somewhere else. We got into the car. She sat in the back seat with him, earbuds in, giggling softly. I drove, eyes forward, hands steady, heart doing backflips behind my ribs. At the ceremony, I helped fix her cap one last time. She was too distracted to notice my hands shaking. She walked ahead with him, waving at her friends, posing for selfies. And I stood there like the assistant, the helper, the woman who came along for the ride. I watched her shine. Everyone clapped. She was beautiful, confident, full of energy. The whole world seemed to be watching her glow. But she never turned to look for the flame behind the spotlight. They called her name, full and clear. I stood up with the rest of the crowd, clapping so hard my palms stung. My baby walked across that stage in her cap and gown like she owned the world. And for a moment I believed she did. She looked proud, confident. She stood at the microphone, the sun from the windows casting a soft glow on her face. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, every eye in the room locked on her. She cleared her throat. Her voice wavered, and I felt my chest swell. I leaned in, thinking, here it comes. The moment where she says something about how we made it. How her mama stood by her. How love raised her more than luck. But what I heard instead, I want to thank my love. The one who stayed up with me every night, telling me I could do this. Who believed in me when no one else did. And the whole room awed. She paused and looked right at him. He nodded, like he'd earned it. Like he'd built her from the ground up. And the truth is, he'd only known her for 6 months. 6. I watched her speak like he was her lifeline. Her anchor, her reason. But he didn't sit through homework meltdowns at midnight. He didn't drive her to every school project with glitter stuck in the seatbelt. He didn't carry her into the ER when she broke her wrist in middle school. I did all that. Me. And yet, I wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not a whisper, not even a passing thanks to my mom. Nothing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't jealous. I didn't roll my eyes or cross my arms. No, I just sat there, still and quiet, while something inside me cracked. Not loud enough for anyone else to hear, but loud enough for me to feel. It wasn't rage, it was something deeper. I felt erased. 18 years of being her first call, her safe place, her foundation, and in that moment, I was just another face in the crowd. But while she was talking, while the people around me kept clapping, something in me stood up before I did. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't spite, it was a quiet reminder to myself. You mattered. Even if no one claps for you, you mattered. So as they cheered, I reached into my purse. My fingers touched the edges of the envelope, the one labeled for when she flies. And I knew it was time. I kept clapping. Not because I felt proud, but because I'd taught myself long ago to clap for others, even when my hands were tired. I didn't stop smiling either. Sometimes you've got to carry your dignity like a purse. You keep it close and hold it high. Once the speeches ended and everyone started rising to take pictures, I reached for my own bag, slipped it over my shoulder. I didn't rush. I didn't make a fuss. I just stood up, one step at a time, and walked down that center aisle. People were moving around me, laughing, hugging, shouting congratulations. Balloons were bobbing, flash bulbs going off. But in my mind, everything slowed down. Like I was moving through water. Calm, steady. I could see the counselor's desk off to the side near the stage, tucked away behind a small table of diplomas and program booklets. Mrs. Clark was there, just like she always was, organized, observant, hands folded. When I reached her, I didn't say much, just opened my purse and pulled out the envelope. It had been sitting there all morning, heavy with more than just paper. It carried years of baking, budgeting, bending over backward. I looked her in the eye. My voice didn't shake. Please redirect this, I said, placing the envelope gently on her desk. To someone whose thank you isn't rehearsed. She didn't ask why, didn't blink twice. She knew. Maybe she saw the whole thing, the speech, the silence, the look on my face. Or maybe she just knew me well enough to understand that when I move quiet, it means I've already said all I needed to. She gave one small nod. that's all. And in that nod, I felt seen, heard, respected. I didn't linger. I didn't wait to see my daughter's reaction. I turned around, walked back up the aisle, and stepped outside into the late afternoon sun. The breeze felt different, like it had cleared a space in me that had been stuffed too full for too long. And just like that, I had done what I came to do. Not to take anything away from her, but to remind myself, and maybe her too, that love can be strong. But it doesn't have to be silent. I didn't wait for the photos, didn't stay for the cake or the group pictures by the banner that read, "Congratulations, class of 2025. I just walked out while the noise was still loud, while the cameras were still flashing, while my name was still forgotten. She didn't notice I was gone. Or maybe she did, but not in a way that made her pause. I drove home with both hands on the wheel, the radio off, windows cracked just enough to let the wind touch my face. That kind of silence feels different when you've got so much to say and no one to say it to. At every red light, I saw her face in my mind, smiling, holding onto his arm, so sure of herself. I remembered when she was 5 and couldn't walk into the classroom without holding my hand. Now she walked across the stage like she raised herself. When I got home, I went straight to the living room. The decorations from earlier that morning were still there. Balloons tied to chairs, a handmade sign taped to the wall. "We're so proud of you," written in gold letters I bought at the dollar store. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. The house was too quiet, too still. I walked over and started untaping the letters one by one. The balloons floated gently behind me, almost like they knew it was time to come down. I packed away the extra plates, the leftover cupcakes, the small gifts I had picked out. One of them still had the tag on it, "To my daughter, for the road ahead." I placed it gently in the back of the drawer. It didn't hurt because she forgot me. That's easy. People forget things all the time. It hurt because I still remembered her, when she had no name, no voice, no choice. When the world was too loud for her little ears and she'd cry until I hummed her to sleep. When she thought my lap was the safest place on earth. That kind of remembering doesn't fade overnight. It stays. It sticks to your heart like soft glue. You carry it, even when they've put it down. So I sat in the kitchen with a warm cup of tea, watching the sun settle over the backyard, and I told myself, I did my part. I showed up. I raised her. I gave my best. Even if the thank you never came, the truth still stood. Because love doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it just leaves quietly, with the one who gave it. It was a quiet Sunday morning. The kind where the clock ticks loud and the air feels thick with waiting. I was in the kitchen, folding a clean dish towel, when I heard the knock at the door. 3 soft taps. I opened it, and there she was. Her eyes were red. Hair pulled back in a messy bun, no makeup, no smile. In her hands, a crumpled printout. Her fingers shaking. She didn't say hi, didn't say I'm sorry. She just held up the paper like it was proof that the ground had cracked open under her feet. "Full tuition redirected?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "You gave it away?" I didn't flinch. Didn't rush to explain myself. I looked at her, really looked at her. The girl I raised, standing in front of me like she was seeing me for the first time. I stepped aside and said, "Come in." She did. Quietly. We walked into the kitchen. I poured 2 cups of tea. The same way I always used to when we had hard things to talk about. Sugar for her, lemon for me. I didn't say a word as I set the cup in front of her. She stared at it like she was trying to remember something soft. She finally looked up and asked, "Why would you do that?" I stirred my tea and said, gentle but sure, "Because love doesn't have to clap, but it should at least remember." She blinked and the tears came again. Not loud sobs, just slow, steady tears that slid down her cheeks like they'd been waiting a long time. "I didn't mean to forget you," she whispered. I nodded, "I know." We sat in silence for a while. She looked down at her tea, hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only warm thing left in the room. I didn't scold her. I didn't remind her of the speeches or the boyfriend or the moment my name didn't pass her lips. I wasn't there to make her feel small. I just wanted her to know the truth. "You didn't break me," I said, "but you did show me how far we'd drifted. And sometimes, the only way to close that distance is to let the echoes speak louder than the applause." She didn't say much after that, but I saw it in her face, the weight of memory returning. The pictures in her head that she forgot to carry on stage. Me braiding her hair, me clapping at her choir concerts, me standing in the hallway with a towel when she was sick. She stayed for another hour. We didn't fix everything, but we started something. A quiet beginning. The kind where no one's right, but everyone is listening. And that, to me, was more valuable than any thank you speech. Now listen to me. If you raised someone through storms and they forgot who held the umbrella, don't shrink. Don't let that make you small. Stand up in your truth, even if nobody claps when you do. I didn't take that envelope away to punish her. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I needed to remind myself that I mattered too. That I wasn't just the background of her story. I was the foundation. The steady hand, the warm meal, the sleepless nights. You can love someone with your whole heart and still choose your dignity. You can cheer them on and still hold the line when they forget where they came from. Some people won't remember all the things you did until life makes them sit still long enough to reflect. But by then, you don't have to wait around for the credit. You already know what you gave. You already know what it cost. If they forget your name in the spotlight, let them. Just make sure you don't forget it in your own mirror. I don't regret raising her. I don't regret the sacrifices. But I do know now, I should have spoken up sooner. Not to demand thanks, just to remind her who built the path she walks on. So, if you've ever been overlooked, left off the list, passed over in someone else's big moment, take heart. You're not invisible here. Comment below if someone ever forgot to thank you after you gave them everything. Tell your story, let it breathe. And if this story found you tonight, subscribe to Granny Truths. This porch light never turns off. Not for the forgotten, not for the quiet ones, not for you. Thank you, see you next time.